Welcome, my name is Lindsay and today I'm going to be doing a video on something a little bit different. This video is going to be about our garden and pretty much a recap of everything that happened in spring. Just want to document what's been going on with it so far, kind of give you guys a tour, show you things as they are right now. That way I have all of this information as a reference point when I go to plan for my garden next year, which I should mention first and foremost, we had a baby in late March. So we haven't been nearly as productive in the garden as we normally would, but I still think that there have been some things that have been happening that are worth mentioning. But before we get into it, I wanted to give you guys kind of a general concept of what we have going on here. We live in the suburbs. We're really squished between houses in our neighborhood, and we have just enough space really to have a chicken coop with a small flock of backyard chickens. They have a little run, and then we have enough space to put raised garden beds pretty much throughout the entire perimeter of our backyard, and it works out pretty well. As we've put an emphasis more and more on garden-based foods, local foods, grass-fed, pasture, organic meat, and all that, we've come to rely more and more on food that we can grow and preserve. So I am constantly trying to find new ways to utilize our space in a way that's effective. That we are fortunate enough to have family nearby that share their garden space with us. So the things that I grow here are things that I feel need to have a little bit more attention, if that makes any sense. Like basil, for instance, things that will bolt quickly, things that need to be harvested quickly. That's the kind of thing I tend to grow here. I don't usually grow things like squash or cucumbers, things that vine out and take a lot of space. I will occasionally experiment with stuff like that, but our yard size and the fact that we have another area to use for gardening kind of dictates the kinds of things that I grow here. So let's talk about what happened in the garden in spring. Around St. Patrick's Day, we knew we were going to be having the baby at any moment. We decided to risk the weather and plant some peas, some lettuce greens, spinach, arugula, and we also planted some carrots and radishes. And typically with carrots and radishes, I will plant them in the same rows because I read a long time ago that if you plant radishes and carrots together, the radishes grow up quickly, and when you harvest those, it aerates the soil for the carrots. And ever since I read that, I've been doing it, and it works out really well every time. So we've already harvested the radishes and we pickled them using a lacto-fermented method, and now the carrots are coming up, and we've been able to munch on some of those as we thin the beds. Our peas have already been harvested as well. I only planted one bed's worth of those, and with peas it's kind of iffy on whether or not it's worth growing them here because we don't have enough space to make it worth it most of the time, but I just have a soft spot in my heart for fresh peas. So I've loved growing them and eating them straight from the garden ever since I was a little kid. As for our salad greens, the lettuces are doing really well, but the arugula and the spinach bolted. We had a heat wave here in Oregon in mid-June. It got up to almost 100 degrees for 2 days. It was just really hot. That was the end of the arugula and the spinach. However, I was able to enjoy those for a couple of months this year because we planted them so early. So next year, I want to make sure that we plant all of those things really no later than March. So in the place of the spinach and arugula, I've planted more radishes, and they are now just about ready to harvest. And in the place of the peas, I have planted some cabbages. So other than the things that we planted, we also have some perennials that are doing pretty well, or did pretty well, namely our artichokes. Started from seeds artichokes 2 years ago, and the first year that I planted them, I only got one artichoke out of, I think it was 5 plants. The second year I got a good handful, and then this year I got tons. I just harvested the last of them this last weekend and pruned them down to the ground, and in that garden bed I put down some leek starts, so I'm excited for that. I figured that planting leeks in that bed would be the best because I know that the artichokes are going to come back and we'll probably get another harvest in the fall. So I wanted to put something in that space that would be unobtrusive to the artichokes, or as unobtrusive as possible. Aside from the artichokes, our raspberries are doing really well. We just started getting ripe berries last week, and they are delicious. However, our blueberries and our strawberries, not so good. So in addition to the things we've planted in our perennial plants, we've also had a couple of kind of surprises. First, we always have some volunteer sunflowers. Ever since the very first year we planted sunflowers, which was I think 3 years ago, there's always some sunflowers that just pop up on their own and are amazing. And that's happening again this year. We have one that's really big and I cannot wait to see it bloom. We also have a volunteer tomato plant, some volunteer kale, and I also saw a volunteer broccoli in our carrot bed. So I try to leave the volunteers alone because I kind of like how things are just kind of happening on their own. I like to see what happens, what sort of hybrids come out of it. Last year we had a random acorn squash plant decide to grow in our tomato beds up front. And then another surprise was we grew potatoes in grow bags last year, and I didn't plant anything in them this year, but we have 3 out of 4 grow bags with potato plants growing. So one more thing I wanted to mention before I get into the just the video rolling and showing you our garden and what we have planted over the last weekend. So typically when it comes to tomatoes and peppers, eggplants, tomatillos, things like that, I will start them from seed in trays. I've done this in the house near a sunny window. I've done this in a cold frame. This is the first year that I've tried doing it out on the deck, and it seemed like it was going really well. They all germinated, but then we got that really intense heat wave that I mentioned earlier, and after that they just stopped growing. None of them got their true leaves, and I'm kind of wondering if they just got fried. So I think I'm going to try to do that again next year, but my guess is that they don't really grow well on the deck. We'll see. So instead of starting them from seeds this year, we went to Home Depot and just got some starts, which is what you have to do when you have a newborn. I do want to mention that we utilize both our front and backyard. Our front yard is south facing, so it gets full sun, and that's really the best place to grow our warmer weather, full sun friendly plants like tomatoes and peppers and eggplants and tomatillos and things like that. And we plant everything that doesn't mind a little shade in the back, even though the backyard mostly gets full sun too. So yeah, let the tour begin.